Shalom everyone, we are continuing our limud of Sefer Yeshayahu, and we are really beginning the second part of the book. Yeshayahu is a very long Sefer. It is 66 parakim, but it is somewhat unequally divided into two different halves. Perek Aleph to Lamed Tes, although it did talk about Mashiach, was primarily concerned with Sancheriv, Assyria, the exile of the 10 tribes, the devastation of Malchus Yehuda, but ending with the miraculous salvation of Yerushalayim, with the 185,000 soldiers of Sancheriv dying suddenly the first night of Pesach. From Perek Mem to Perek Samach Vav, the last 27 parakim, we are dealing primarily with comfort and nechama about Mashiach. Again, remember, Yeshayahu lived well over 100 years before the Chorban Bayis Rishon, and yet his nevuah right now is a nevuah of a long term, after the Chorban Bayis Rishon, and after the Golus Bavel, and after the Bayis Sheni, and after the Chorban Bayis Sheni, into the Golus that we are still experiencing to this very day. There will eventually be a Geula, there will be a Mashiach, there will be a Binyan Beis HaMikdash, there will be an ingathering of the exiles, a Kibbutz Goliath. There will eventually be, even after that, a Techiyas HaMesim. All of these are the themes of the second half of Yeshayahu, beginning with Perek Mem. Many of these verses will be familiar to you, simply because the 7 Haftarahs of comfort, the Shiva or Sheva Dinechemta, which are the Haftarahs that we read from after Tisha B'Av till the last Shabbos of the year before Rosh Hashanah, 7 weeks, all of them are taken from this part of Yeshayahu. And as we go through the Psukim, I will remind you which are the Haftarahs and the like. In addition, there are a number of Haftarahs of other Parshios, Bereshis, Noach, Lech Lecha, taken from Yeshayahu as well. In fact, Yeshayahu has more Haftarahs than any of the Nevi'im in Tanakh. One of the questions that people are going to raise is there seems to be a lot of repetition. Over and over again, the same idea. In gathering the exiles, your enemies will be punished. There will be the light of Hashem revealed upon you. And it's said over and over and over again. And people wonder, why is there so much repetition? And there are really 2 answers that I think you need to know. One is that certainly, as the Malbim writes, in Kisvei HaKodesh, there is never redundancy. So even if the same idea is expressed multiple times, there will always be a chiddush, there will always be a nuance, there will always be a twist, there will always be a haisafa, because things are not just repeated for stylistic elegance. That is one mahalach. But in truth, there's actually another reason as well, and that is the nature of comfort. Imagine if you had a child who was lost, right? The child was lost, and they say all children remember the first time they were separated from their parents in a shopping center, in a mall. You know, you turn a corner, the child got distracted by something, and for a few minutes, a few seconds even, the child doesn't know where his parents are, the child is panicking, and of course the parent is panicking probably even more. And if the child starts to cry and he's united with his parent, so the parent might say something like, I love you, Mamala, I love you, 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 everything is okay. And one wonders, if you want to be a lamdan, why does Ima have to say, I love you 50 times? She said it 1 time, so that means she loves him. Why repeat over and over and over again? And the answer is, when a person is scared, when a person's heart is broken, it's not enough for the brain to absorb an idea. It has to penetrate the kishkas. It has to go into the heart. You need to say it over and over and over again till the person who needs that message absorbs it. This was Rav Yisrael Salanter's Shita Bat Musar. A person says over, this is called Musar B'Hispilus. Musar with emotional arousal, where a person says a Maimer Chazal or a Pasuk many, many, many times, even though he knows what the Pasuk says already. But to be mashpia on the leiv, you need repetition. Now remember, and we forget this sometimes, that these nevuos were originally oral. They were shmuzin. Yeshayahu was addressing people. In fact, that's a big nafkamina between Nevi'im and Kesuvim. Kesuvim, the Eibishter said, write down. Nevi'im, he also said, speak it out. So he's speaking to people. He's speaking to people that are afraid. He's speaking to people that have been demoralized. He's speaking to people that have been devastated, either by tragedies that have already happened, like the devastation of Malchus Yehuda by Sancheriv, or by fear of the devastations that are going to happen, as Yeshayahu told them, as well as other Nevi'im. So they need to be reassured again and again and again. And Mimela, this is an alternative mahalach. Instead of looking for how is this nevuah different than that nevuah, think of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as a loving parent that reassures a broken-hearted, scared child that I'm here for you, I'll be with you, I will take care of you. Do not be afraid. Seen in that way, the great number of apparent repetitions in this part of Yeshayahu is really a highlighting of the intensive love of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I think this is an important teorah in which sometimes we become, I don't want to get into a whole drasha on this, because after all this is a B'kiyas shir, theoretically, but we sometimes get into a mahalach of over-analyzing these messages only with our mind, without getting a sense of how the Navi wants to be mashpia in the leiv as well. Leiv umayach. So now we will start Perek Mem, and Perek Mem is very familiar to us. It is the Haftarah of the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av, and that is why the Haftarah is called, the Shabbos is called Shabbos Nachamu, the Shabbos of comfort, because the Haftarah is Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, which is Yeshayahu Perek Mem. And it begins with Hashem speaking, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami, Yaimar Elokeichem. So first, let me just point out that there's a common mistranslation of Nachamu. Many people translate the pasuk that Hashem is speaking to his nation, Yisrael, and he's saying, be comforted. That is not how the Rishonim translate it. Rather, Hashem is speaking to the Nevi'im, and he's saying, Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. Ami is the object, not the subject. The Nevi'im are commanded, go and comfort my nation. So this is a tzivoy to the Nevi'im, Yaimar Elokeichem, so says your God. And this is actually borne out by the next pasuk, which is referring to what the Nevi'im are supposed to say. Dabru alev Yerushalayim. Speak to the heart of Yerushalayim. And again, the Mitzuda says, speak in a way that will penetrate their heart and not just their mind. Vikiru elah, and call out to her. Again, the city Yerushalayim is being personified as if it's a person. And that, of course, is very common. That's Eicha, and Almana, etc. But really it refers to the Jewish people as a whole. Tell her this message. Give her this message. After Churban and Galus and persecution and crusades and inquisitions and holocausts, there will come a time, ki mal'ah tziva'ah. Her time of Galus has been filled. Ki nirtza avonah. Her sins have been forgiven. Ki lokcha miyad Hashem kiflayim b'chol chateisaha. She has received from God double compared to the sins that she committed. Now, obviously, the Meforshim have a problem with this, because if you're telling me, as it were, that God punished Klal Yisrael more than they deserved, He punished them double from what they deserved, then chas v'shalom, that would suggest Hashem is not just. Hashem is guilty of injustice. Obviously, every single einesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives us is exactly what we deserve. So because of this, kiflayim is understood not as Hashem giving them twice more than they deserve, but it simply means there will be two exiles. There will be a Chorban Bayis Rishain, which is one Golus, and then there'll be a Chorban Bayis Sheni, which is the second Golus that we are sadly still in, and that's Kiflayim. Kol Kairei Bamidbar, there is a voice that calls out in the desert. The desert represents desolation and emptiness. Panu Derech Hashem. Clear away, get rid of the debris to make a derech for Hashem's people. As if to say, the road will be clear for the Yidden to come back to Eretz Yisrael and build the Beis HaMikdash. Yashru bi'arava mesilo lokeinu, straighten out in the wilderness a pathway for the glory of God. Kol gei yinosei, all of the valleys. Again, it's symbolically describing the idea that, you know, when you have ground that has valleys, depressions, and mountains, it's hard to walk through it. Going down is hard on the knees. Going up is hard on the lungs. So the concept would be, when Hashem makes these roads that will bring us back, the valleys will be lifted to be regular ground level, and the mountains and the hills will be lowered. V'hayah alkov lamishor, and the pathways that are crooked will be straightened out. Harechasim lebika, the rechasim are again, the high places will become level. Again, an idea that the time will come when the obstacles that will stop us from coming back will be removed. V'nigle kavod Hashem, and the glory of Hashem will be revealed to the whole world, even the Goyim. V'ra'u kol basor yachdav, and all of humankind will see together. Ki pi Hashem diber, that it is the mouth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that decreed. Because the return of... Now again, what does this mean? Is this only a messianic thing? Is it referring to Medinat Yisrael, get into Zionist issues, or Bechlal, just generally the return of the Yidden to Eretz Yisrael, which in itself is a great miracle? Many people can read these nevuos in different ways, and absent a Navi that can tell us exactly what these nevuos mean, we're not in a position to fully understand it. But the Navi is making a statement that the return of the Yidden to Eretz Yisrael is so miraculous and so wondrous that for Ra'u Kol Basor Yachdav, all will acknowledge that this came about through the decree of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no other way it could be explained. B'derech klal, Rav Yaakov Emden Taka tells us, in a more general way, that the survival of Am Yisrael, and that's what the Navi is talking about as well, that the Golus is not going to destroy us. The survival of Eretz Yisrael, of Am Yisrael, is so wondrous that it is a greater miracle than the 10 Makos and Kriyas Yamsuf. The fact that we are here when every nation in the ancient world tried to destroy us. So this is the Kol Koreh, clear a path for God's people. Pasuk Vav, Kael Aimer Kra. A voice from heaven calls out to the prophets, Kra, proclaim. V'yamar Ma'akra. And I, as a Navi, Yeshayahu is telling us his process. What should I say? And the answer is, Kol HaBasar Chatzir. All flesh, with all of their powers, all of their systems, is nothing better than grass that vithers away. V'chol Chasto, and all of the loving kindness that nations do. They build this and they build that. Kitzitz HaSadeh is like a blossom in the field. So it looks good for a short time. But Yavesh Chatzir Novel Sitz. But eventually grass will dry up and flowers will wither. Ki Ruach Hashem Nashva Bo, because the wind of Hashem, the hot wind, blows against it and dries it out. Ochein Chatzir Ha'am. And indeed that is true for every nation. Every nation will be like chatzir, like grass. But what you need to know is, Yavesh chatzir novel sitz. The grass dries up, and the blossom withers. Uduvar Elokeinu yokum li'olam. But the words of Hashem will endure forever. Now, Al Har Gavaya Ali Lach Mevaseres Siyain. So now the Navi is addressing someone that is called Mivaseret Tzion, right? That's the name of the suburb right outside of Yerushalayim. Mivaseret Tzion literally means the woman who is announcing good tidings. For Tzion, which Tzion is Yerushalayim, the Harabayis. The Mefarshim say, however, the Mavaseret Tzion is a poetic reference to the Chevel HaNeviim, the groups of Neviim. Yeshayahu is one of them, but all the Neviim. Meaning, you, Neviim, that are the Mavaseret Tzion, you are the ones who are here to announce the Geula, the good news, the B'saira Teva of Tzion. Go up on the mountains, meaning do it in a way that people will hear you. Harimi b'kayach kailech. Raise your voice strongly. Mivaseret Yerushalayim. Harimi, raise your voice. Al tiroi, do not be afraid. Imri li'arei Yehuda. Again, speaking to the woman, Mivaseret Tzion, who is the Chaval HaNeviim. Hine Elokeichem. Behold, your God is coming. Don't give up. Hine Hashem Elokim bechazak yavo. God will come with mighty strength. Uzrao moshlalo. And his arm, again, of course God does not have a arm, but we talk about Zeraya and Etuya. But, so Zeraya is a kinoi for the strength of Hashem. His arm will be ruling. Hine sacharai itai. The reward that he will give to the tzaddikim that had faith is with Hashem. Pu'ulasai lefanav. All of the pu'ula, all of the work that Hashem has to do to bring Kavyachol, to bring the Jewish people back, is before Hashem to do. Kiraya edra yira. As a shepherd who patiently takes care of his flock. Bizrao yikabetz tolaim. Just as a shepherd will gather the weak lambs in his arm and carry them. Ubecheko yisa, and in his lap he will hold them if they're not able to walk. Olos yinahel, he leads the nursing sheep that are weak. So too, on one hand, Hashem will reward the tzaddikim. But on the other hand, there will be Yidden who will be weak. Again, it's describing a number of things here. On one level, we have the physical weaknesses. When Mashiach comes, there will be Yidden that will be old, that will be sick, that will be disillusioned, that will be tzabrachen, that will be broken. Remember, this is the aftermath of the war of Gog and Magog. And Hashem will lovingly gather them and bring them back. Those who are physically infirm and those who are spiritually infirm, as a shepherd gathers his sheep. Again, if you have a good memory, you may notice that these phrases, Karaya Edrei, Kavakaras Raya Edrei, appears in Unasana Taikef that we recite on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Pasuk Yud Beis, Mi Modad B'Sha'olai Mayim, B'Shamayim Bazeres Tikein, V'chol B'Sholish Afar Oretz, V'Shakal B'Peles Harim Megvos V'Maznav. So at this point, the Navi is discussing the awesome power of Hashem, because the Jews have been ruled and persecuted by this empire and that empire. Sancheiriv, Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, Greece, Rome, all of the Goliaths that we've been through since the Churban Bayis Sheni. But now we are describing how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is greater, infinitely greater, than any of them. Who is able to measure all of the seas of the water, of the world? Right? The Atlantic, Pacific, the Mediterranean, right? All of the ocean, Kaviyachol, can be held in Hashem's fist. Again, an expression. Who can measure the waters of the world with his fist? Who can measure the heavens with a zeres? A zeres is the name of a midah. It's really a chatzi amma. An amma is from an elbow to a finger. That's an amma. And again, halachically that translates between 1.5 feet and 2 feet. But technically it's here to here. But we have a standardized measure. A zeres is a chatzi amma. If you remember, the Torah says the Kohen Gadol's breastplate, zeres orko v'zeres rachbo, it is a square zeres by a zeres. So, Kaviyachol, we are describing, if we describe Hashem as having an arm, so he also has an amma, and he also therefore has a zeres. So if Hashem can measure the waters of the world in his fist, he can measure the whole length of all of the heavens with his zeres. V'chol b'sholish afar oretz. Again, sholish is also a type of measure, 1/3 of an amma. He can measure with a sholish all of the area of the earth. V'shakal b'peles harim ugvos b'maznayim. And he can weigh the mountains and the hills on his scale. Again, this is a poetic way of describing how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is infinitely greater and more powerful than all of us. Mi tikein es ruach Hashem. But looking at the puny human being, who can measure the spirit of Hashem? V'yish atzaso yodienu. And who can be God's advisor to give him wisdom? Esmi noas vayivineu. Who does Hashem consult? Who will give him understanding? Vilamdeu bi'arich mishpat, that can teach him the ways of judgment. Vilamdeu das, and can teach Hashem das, v'derech tevunos yodienu, and a way of understanding. Meaning, Hashem gives us, there's nothing we can give him. Hein goyim kamar midli. All the nations of the world are like a little drop that falls off a bucket. Right? When you lift up a bucket from a well, so the bucket is filled, there'll be a little drop that's called mar midli, a drop of water from a bucket. Uchashachak maznayim nechshavu, and like the dust that remains on a scale. Right? If you weigh something on a scale, let's say you weigh some flour, you take off the flour, there'll be a little dust left over. the goyim, the powerful goyim of the world, are like the shachat maznayim. Hein iyim kedok yitol. And the islands of the world are plucked up by Hashem like a piece of dust. Ulevanayin ein day bo'er, v'chayaso ein day Allah. And all of these powerful nations are so sinful that there is not enough trees in the forests of Lebanon and not enough animals for korbanos to give them a kapara. Their averos are so enormous. This is not referring to the Jewish people, but to the Umos HaOlam that persecuted the Jewish people, that there are not enough trees in the forest of Lebanon and not enough animals in the world to be olos as kaparos. By the way, this is interesting. Remes, the Gemara, I didn't see this anywhere, but the Gemara says that non-Jews can also bring korbanos to the Beis HaMikdash, but they can only bring olos and no other korban. So maybe it's medoyak that even if this is a kapara for sin, a non-Jew does not bring a korban chatas, a non-Jew only brings a korban olah. Kol hagoyim ka'ayin negdo, all the nations are like nothing to Hashem. Me'efes v'sayu nechshu lo, they are worse than zero and tayu. Tayu is the emptiness of the universe before there was creation. V'el mi tedamyon el, to whom will you compare Hashem? Umad demustarchu lo, and how can you even give Hashem an image? So now the Navi gives a little bit of a teichacha to the Yidden, so he's zigzagging a little bit, who were over an Avodah Zarah. Ha-pesel nosach charash, an idol, a metal idol, is initially poured by a craftsman, meaning metal is melted into liquid, then poured into a mold to form a statue. V'tzoreif b'zahav yirakenu, and then a goldsmith will beat it to get it in final shape. Uresukos kesef tzoreif, and a silversmith will attach silver chains to the gold statue as an adornment. Ha-mesukan, so mesukan does not mean a person in danger, but mesukan is like the modern Hebrew misken, which means oni, the poor person who cannot afford a gold or silver idol. Truma eitz lo yerkav yivchar, his donation will be a good piece of wood that will not rot, he will choose. Charash chacham yivakesh lei, he will look for a skilled carpenter. Lahachin pesel lo yimait, to make an idol that will not break or will not falter. In other words, these psukim are describing the fact that Avodah Zarah is made by a person. And how foolish can it be that I worship something that I made with my own hands, or that I commissioned somebody else to make for me? Halo tedu, halo tishmo. Have you not heard? Do you not know? Halo hu gad miroshachem, have you not been told from the very beginning? Halo havinaisa meista zaras, that from the very foundations of the earth, didn't you understand that there's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Hayeshev al chug haaretz, he sits atop the circle of the world. Now again, this is maybe actually a proof that the Nevi'im and Chazal knew that the earth was round. Chug haaretz. V'yashveh kechadavim, and looking down at the inhabitants, they're like grasshoppers. Hanaita kadaik shamayim, he spreads the heavens out like a curtain. Vayimtechem ki oel lasheves, and he stretches it out like a tent to dwell under. Hanosein reiznim la'ayin, he makes the rulers to be nothing. Shoftei eretz katayu asa, he makes the most powerful judges as if they are tayu, completely empty. Af bal nito, they cannot be planted. Again, this is a remez to being firm and secure. Af bal zerayu, they cannot be sown. Af bal shirish biyaretz gizam, They cannot have a root in the land. They get uprooted. Gam nashaf behem vayivaishu. Hashem blows at them and they dry out. Usa'ara kekash tisaim. And Hashem's storm blows them away like straw and stubble. Again, this is part of the Nechama. Again, on one hand, there's a Musar to Klal Yisrael. It's also part of the Nechama, that these powerful nations that seem to be invisible are going to be blown away. V'yalmi tedamyuni v'eshva. Speaking to us, to whom will you compare me, Hashem, that I will be comparable? Yaimar Kadosh, says the Holy One. Now the very word Kadosh means muvdal, separated. Now we have a beautiful pasuk. Su'u marai meinechem. Look up at the shamayim. Raise your eyes to the heavens. Ura'u mi bara ela. And see who created them. The millions of stars, the galaxies, the immensity of the universe. Hamaitzi b'mispar tziva'am. That every day God counts the numbers. God is aware of every star, every planet, every comet has a function, has a purpose. L'kulam b'shem yikra. Everyone has a name. A name is symbolic of a tachlis. Meirov onim v'amitz koach. Because of the greatness of Hashem's strength, ish lo nedar. Not a single one. So ish doesn't mean a man, but it's every entity. Not a single star is ignored. Nothing is missing. Now, this is the first 26 psukim. This is the Haftarah for Shabbos Nachamo. The rest of the parak is also a Haftarah, but it's a Haftarah for a different week. So the first week is the first 26 verses, but the Navi just continues. Lama Saimar Yaakov Usadaber Yisrael Nistra Darki Mi Hashem Umalokai Mishpati Yavor. Why is Yaakov, so Yaakov refers to the Hamonam, Yisrael are the Tzaddikim, but both will sometimes give up hope. Why do you say, my way must be hidden from Hashem? Meaning, Hashem seems not to be paying attention to me. Umelokai mishpati yavor, and my judgment has seemed to pass. In other words, I give up. I'm tzubrachen. Why do you say that? The Navi says. Halo yadata? Don't you know? Imlo shamata? Haven't you heard? Elokei olam Hashem. Hashem is the God of eternity. Borek etzos haaretz. He created all of the universe. Lo yiyaf lo yigah. He does not get tired or exhausted. Ein cheker lisfunaso. There is no end to his understanding. No sein la yoyef kayach. He gives strength to the weary. This is the makor of the bracha every morning. No sein la yoyef kayach. Ule'ein onim, and the person without strength. Otzma yarbe. Hashem will increase his strength when the time comes. Vayiyafu na'arim vayigo. Even young people who are physically fit, they run and they run and they run. Eventually, they get tired. Bachorim kasholi kashelu. Even young men, athletic men, will stumble and trip. So, stam, human strength and human endurance, gets weak after a while. But v'koyei Hashem. So, Shaila, do you read it kovei Hashem or koyei Hashem? But the meaning is the same. But those who hope in God, yachlifu koach, will get renewed strength. Yalu ever kanasharim, they will be given wings like the eagles. Yarutzu v'lo yigo. When they run, they will not get tired. Yelchu. When they walk, v'lo yiyofu, they will not get exhausted. The message here is, don't give up. Don't be miyayish. Hashem will give you strength. And the strength you will get from Hashem will never leave you. You will not be exhausted. Again, physically we will get exhausted, but spiritually and emotionally, we will always have that sense when the Geula comes that Hashem is with us. So this is the end of Perek Mem. It is still in the middle of the Haftarah, which will continue in Perek Mem Aleph.